Hey guys, you're catching me rather informal today and on the run. I had an opportunity to interview Gervase Kolmos for the second time on this upcoming episode. And I'm just going to go ahead and forewarn you, you might want to pop your earbuds in or put some headphones on. We use some choice language sometimes in this particular episode. But this episode is all about how to get into a relationship with yourself, right? We try to make choices and decisions or fulfill different roles or be our to-do list. And the truth is that until you get into a relationship with yourself, it's really, really easy to outsource that inner knowing. And it's really easy to just freeze and not do anything at all. And we're not available for that when we want to live our most empowered life. So pop your earbuds in and step in and join with me for this episode of the Mindrise podcast. I'll talk to y'all soon. What I wanted to talk to you about today is about getting into relationship with yourself. Right? And what are the ways in which we get into relationship with ourselves? What are the tools that we use to get into relationship with ourselves? When do we even, and I don't know the bypass is like such an overused word these days, but like, I don't know if it's bypass, but we go and we Google what it should be, whether it's the archetype or the spirit guide, spirit animal, whatever, like, and then we're like, oh, I saw all those number 4s. That's what it must mean. And it's just like, did you check in with yourself?
Yeah, but we're not taught how to do that, and I think that the thing that is it seems so fucking simple. You're like, this is so easy, but nothing about the way that we were raised taught us that the solution is within, or that you are the expert of your experience. I think, and maybe we've talked about this before, but entrepreneurship kind of lends itself to this lesson. So you kind of learn a little bit faster than, a person who's maybe in a corporate job or, a stay-at-home mom or something like that, because so much of entrepreneurship is like really learning to be your own authority on whatever you do. But I'm always really humbled when I remember when I start working with a woman who I'm so grateful that she trusts me, because then when we start, I'm like, you do know what you got yourself into, right? Like, you do know what I do, because for some of them, it's their very first time even just cracking the book of self and soul and spirituality. I mean, all of that is like extra, but really just self. But what happens, what I find is like, as soon as you even just crack the book of self, then that leads to the book of soul and the book of spirituality. So it's kind of like, you picked the book, you hired me. And so I am sorry that this is where we find ourselves, but you knew, right? Like, you trusted something that led you there. So that's my take.
Sure. But and so you're saying, that it's like, okay, you cracked the book, it led you here, which leads you here, which leads you here. And then we're down the rabbit hole. And it's funny because I'm working on this third book. And part of what I've been writing about is like, where did all that come from? Right. Because once you crack the book open and you're like, wait, why the hell don't I know myself? I'm like, oh, hey, so about that, where do your belief systems come from? Where did your identity come from? Did you choose it? Was it chosen for you? Have you actually looked within to say, am I the person I want to be?
Yeah. Is that my truth?
Absolutely. Or am I going through the motions of who I think I'm supposed to be, what role I'm supposed to, be embodying? Okay, if I'm the mom, that must mean that and you and I talked about this in our first episode, right? Like that I must be like Pinteresting the hell out of things. Or, if I'm the corporate chick, like that must mean that I'm, working and burning that midnight oil. It's just
wear pantsuits.
Right.
That's what
I'm going to need a blazer.
Gonna need a pantsuit for that.
Right. But it's like, where do all these stories come from? And I know you talk, and I love that at least my perception of you is that you talk to moms about being themselves and like, yes, P.S. you're also a mom, and we get that too. So and I loved one of your most recent
I don't know if it was a reel or a post or whatever, when you're like, and here's how I win the war, right? I'm
Oh
choosing my
yeah.
battles. Here's how I win the war, because it's both of those things at the same time. But
Mhm.
so Gervase, I'm curious, like, how do we be ourselves, and then at the same point, while we're healing our shit,
Mhm.
impart to our children, like, hey, by the way, like, this is a potential way of doing it without writing a script for them on who they're supposed to be.
Whew! That is a big question, and I can handle it. Okay. So, first of all, so much of what you're describing that women, even and especially mothers, experience is conditioning, right? And so I think to name it is helpful. So like what you're saying is like, as you become a grown woman and you say like, hey, this feels good, this doesn't feel good, this is
Right.
who I am, this is who I thought I was supposed to be, that's all conditioning, right? And yes, we got that a lot from our parents, we got it, we could have gotten it from a lot of places. And so just to clarify, your question is, how do you make sure not to pass on conditioning to your kids when you're still unraveling your own, right?
Yes. And part C of that question would be like, not writing a prescription for who they're supposed to be, right?
Mhm.
And at the same time, giving them the tools that we wish we had.
Yes, yes, yes.
3-part
Well,
question, go.
I can only speak from my experience, and I will say that you can only work with what you've ever got, right? And that's okay. So I think let's, normalize and release any judgments around like, oh, I'm not as, consciously evolved as that mom. So, maybe I'm going to fuck up my kids more than she is or something like that. Because I really think if anybody is listening to this and is like, oh, I would love to not, you know, create an identity for my children and give them more, and give them expression and space to breathe into who they are, and also teach them how to, like, anybody listening who's even skirting, even cracking that book deserves a big fucking round of applause, because I think that is the first step. It's
Right.
like, I was talking to somebody once and she was like, everybody has a wake up date, and I am seeing a lot of women right now who they're coming because of exactly what you're saying, right? They're like, I've kind of been wanting to crack this book, but now it feels urgent because now I see the role that I can have on my children. And I feel like, yay, just like, yay, let's just start with awesome.
Let's celebrate that. Yeah.
You are now waking up and conscious to the role that you play as a mother, and to the benefits of healing yourself. And I just think you can't go wrong from there. Like from there, that is your, from a spiritual psychology perspective, you're right on time. That is your soul's curriculum on this earth. And so great, you're like being handed the next assignment. And so follow it, right? And know that like there is no blueprint from my experience, because let's say you grew up with a mother who, well, I'll just share from my experience. Something that I have just recently uncovered is some conditioning that I received from my mother around, and I do a lot. I'm really fascinated by human design, so I pull this in a lot. But like my chart, what it shows, like my fear gate in human design, is this fear of what is it? I think it's gate 48, but I hope I don't butcher this. I'm really sorry. This fear that like you are inadequate, right? This fear that like you'll never be enough. And as soon as I saw this information, I just knew it was for me. And I heard this voice in my head, like I heard my mother's voice. And I love my mother very much. And I know she will never listen to this podcast, so it makes it easy for me to share this experience. And also I share it from a really healed place with her, but where she used to say to me all the time, who do you think you are? And this is like on repeat in my head. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And when I really have done some of the work around my fears, that's what I hear. Like anytime I'm up leveling or being more true to myself or moving towards any type of desire that I have deemed, you know, like I'm not worthy of, I hear that, like, who do I think I am? And so my work is now to just focus on me unraveling this conditioning around who I get to be in this lifetime, and to trust that as a result, my children will reap the benefits of that. And I think it gets really complicated when, as a mother, you focus on, I have to do this thing with my kids and also heal that. Like you literally probably feel like, you know, and it's too much. It's like totally overwhelming. There's no way to consciously, logically, and on a soul level do all of that. And so like what I always tell women, like, don't even worry about that. That will fix itself as soon as you handle this wound or this conditioning or this story that you have from your childhood, from, you know, your mother, and know that like Sally and Peggy over here have totally different wounds. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, there is, from my perspective, like long answer long, from my perspective, there is no one way to, like you said, like give our kids better than we have. We really get to just focus on our own healing and our own unraveling of, you know, beliefs and conditioning, and trust that then that will guide us in our parenting moments. Because I can share too that my greatest parenting moments, self-proclaimed greatest parenting moments, like where I have like after the fact been like, oh shit, that was we just imprinted something and it was good. It was only possible because I had just cracked the book, like followed the breadcrumbs that I was intuitively feeling of my soul to heal this thing for me. And so my belief is that it gets to be easier than we make it as mothers, and it gets to be really organic. Like we will be given people and opportunities and little breadcrumbs and guideposts along the way that will take us where we need to go to see consciously, like, oh, here's a thing that's in my human design chart or my DNA or my soul's curriculum or whatever you want to call it, depending, you know, that is ready to be healed and addressed. And I'm going to do that and trust that, like, as a result, this will only positively ripple to my children, and I mean everybody else too, but to my children specifically.
Sure. And I think that it's important where we have that cracking of the book moment, right? Or moments, because I don't know that
so
you get just one.
So many books cracked. It's exhausting.
And you get a book and you get a book, right? But I think it's really important that we start to have a conversation with ourselves, and we could talk about it here too, but when you're out of touch, how do you tune back in? Right?
Yeah. So when you're out of touch, how do you tune back in? So
I think I'm asking you the question, but I'm going to start with a little preamble of like, how do you even know that you're out of touch? Right? For me, it's those out of control moments. For me, it's like when I'm rushing and I'm constantly late, or I'm staying up late, or just like I feel like a to-do list, a walking human to-do list.
Yeah.
That's for me, my like white flag, red flag, whatever color flag you want to give me, that like you're out of touch.
Yeah.
You're out. So what are yours that you know you're out of touch, and how do you tune back in?
So this can look a lot of ways. And I think triggers actually play like a beautiful role in this. When I am out of touch, then so let's just keeping with the mother. I feel like we always talk about motherhood when I'm on here. So keeping with the motherhood thing, like if I am out of touch, then if I see another mother on Instagram doing something, or if I'm with a friend who's parenting differently than I will, it will trigger the shit out of me. And that to me is a really like, thank you, because that is showing me something that I desire, that I get to have, that I'm just like not choosing right now. And so I think often like with triggers, we just aren't taught how to work through them, but B, just, use them as like, well, I don't like that bitch, so I just like shut down, right? We just choose judgment instead of curiosity. And when you get curious about a trigger, there is always wisdom for you there about who you desire to be, or something you desire to have, or a disowned part of yourself. So I think for me, triggers are a beautiful like neon sign
Educator,
telling me like, hey, you've like lost. I mean, even, you know what? I'll give you an example. Like a couple months ago, I have a nanny that watches my 2-year-old Monday through Friday, like while I have my work hours, and she works out of the home. So I'm kind of around them all of the time. And she's like this older Mexican woman. She's so sweet. I 100% like manifested her, and it was exactly what I wanted, what I desired. And she and my son have this like super special relationship, and they love each other, and she's obsessed with him. Okay. Like she's obsessed with him. She spoils the shit out of him, which again, sometimes I'm like, but I'm like, this is what you wanted. Anyway, there was a period of a couple weeks where every time I was around her, I felt super insecure about my relationship with my son. And I was like, whoa, this is fascinating, because this isn't my normal truth. This doesn't like line up with who I like think I am and who I, aim to be. And like, what is this about? Right? Like, what is this about? This feeling feels really gross, and like resentment, like, ew, this woman is like taking care of my child and loves him. And I actually have worked with a lot of women who like get super triggered by their nanny. So, it's not a new theme for me, but when you look at it through this lens of, interesting, what is happening here between this woman and my son that I like desire for myself? And it was like, oh, you just want to take off Friday, or it was actually like Thursday, and you just want to go to the St. Patrick's Day, but you want to take off the whole day. You want to like pour into this relationship. This is why you became an entrepreneur, was to have this flexibility with your in your role as a mom. And so it was like, oh, why haven't I been doing that? Oh, I'm out of touch. Like I just like fucking forgot what actually matters. Like I forgot what really makes me happy, right? Because sometimes we think that like crossing things off a to-do list will really make us happy, when the truth is often very far from it. And so I mean, I would argue that anytime we're like really obsessed with our to-do list, you could just use that as your guidepost. Like, I'm out of touch. I've like, whoa, I am like not grounded at all. But yeah, so that for me was an invitation, and I really looked at it and I was like, what do I desire here as his mother? Like, what do I know? I know that I am his mother, and we are inextricably linked forever, and like nobody could be his mother, right? Like all of these truths that you've forgotten. And then I just took my power back from that trigger, and then the next week I was like, I love my nanny. Which is amazing. What the fuck am I talking about? So immature of me.
Because you got back into tune with yourself, right? You tune back in with yourself. Well, what about in business? Like for me, I know that I'm out of touch when I am like asking everyone else for the answer, and I haven't checked in here. Oh, that's like a big red flag for me of like, oh, hey, you've surveyed everybody, including your like 84-year-old neighbor, on what you should do about your funnel. Oh, hey, hold on a second. You got to tune back in. So how's that for you? Like, when do you find yourself out of touch when it comes to business? And then how do you tune back into, we call it business, but I don't know about you, Gervase, but like, I feel like it's art. It's your unique expression in the world. It's how you make impact. For me, it's the very definition of like living my purpose, and
100%.
like, yes, it's a business, and right?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because as you were saying it, I was like, yeah, it's not business. It's like soul expression. And so for me, I have in the last couple of years really dived into energetics. And so I believe that all business models work. Like I tried so many different businessy things. And what I realized is, for me, an energetic business model is all that matters, which means that if it is activating to me, if I am excited by it, if it is something I wake up and I want to do, then it gets to work. Like it'll work, period. And if it's just flat and it's like, oh, I'm doing this funnel because so-and-so said I should, and it's not coming like from within, like it actually probably won't work for me, because I mean, yeah, it gets to work for her and not for me because it's not aligned to my soul's purpose, right? Like you get to create your business truly as like your art, your soul's art on this planet. So what a disservice to your soul and expression to just ask somebody else what you should do versus really harness the muscle of tuning into like what would feel activating to me. And so to actually answer your question, like when I feel like I'm not in that place, my number one priority becomes like getting back to center, like getting back to it's like inner work. When like the outside business stuff isn't exciting and isn't working and I'm not sure and I'm like asking everybody else, it's like, this is not a business thing, this is a me thing. So then I get back to, you know, like, where's my mindset at? Like, where's my mental health at? Where's my, you know, connection to self and soul and spirituality? Like, where's that at? And depending on where it's not feeling really connected, then I follow breadcrumbs to like really just work on that for, it could be literally an hour, it could be a month. So, and that could also look like people falling in your lap, or, you know, my intuition is splenic. So I'll like get a hit of like, reach out to this person, or like hire this coach, or, you know, this is the kind of support that would be really good for you. So then I just, again, like realign myself. And as soon as I do that, it's like fixing a faucet, you know? And then as soon as I get realigned with my soul's purpose, like my purpose of why you're even doing the stupid funnel, then it's like the tap turns on and it all flows out. And it's like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this. And you just know, because you're the authority on you.
Right. There you have it. Because we started the conversation with, you know, how do we get into relationship with ourselves? And, you know, if you're Googling what number 4 means, or your spirit animal, or all this stuff, it's like, you're not in relationship with yourself. So when you're aligned with you, like you just know. And I think that it is also the discernment between like your inner knowing voice, and also what I like to think of as like my piglet, like the sky is falling, like anxious voice, right? Like, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? It's like, those are two different voices. And my higher self is the one that is my intuition, that just knows. Yeah.
Well, and it's also like, that's such a good point, because it's the difference between moving towards something out of abundance and activation and desire, and moving towards something out of like, I'm fucked up, I'm broken, I don't know the answer. And I think sometimes that can take a little practice. But once you start to really filter it through that question, like, am I doing this because it feels, I can still feel scary or weird. Like, you know, am I researching angel numbers because I just feel like really excited by angel numbers, and I actually want to read this book about angel numbers and what does it mean with all the 4s? Like, I do feel like this is for me. Or am I doing it because so-and-so said to do it, but I just don't get it? You know,
like
it's like
outsourcing our knowing with that sometimes.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to make sense. Like, it could be angel numbers for somebody else, and it could be a new workout for somebody else, right? Like, I believe that inner knowing, or your soul, or God, or whatever you call it, like speaks to us through the channels and languages that we understand. So if that's, you know, if that's woo woo, awesome. Like, follow those breadcrumbs. And if that's really traditional and it's a handbag, go for it, right? Like, I don't know, it can be whatever resonates in your world, like what feels activating. Like, actually, that reminds me, like shopping, right? Like, for some women, shopping is something they think they should do, or something they hate to do, or something they do because they want to keep up with the Joneses. And then there's women who, like, shopping is like, oh, I fucking love buying myself this dress, right? And so that's a totally different experience.
Sure.
It's the same experience, but interpreted like 4 different ways. And so just take an experience that feels within reach for you. And I would say, like, examine the different ways that you relate to different things to tap into, like, what are the things that I do because they really fucking feel good. And I
Right.
love this, and this is for me, and I can trust this feeling in my body when I go to do this thing. And what are the things I do because I'm hiding or numbing or outsourcing my knowing or assuming that like like moving out of lack.
Right. Right. Well, because then that goes to like being in relationship with ourselves and developing that relationship with our higher knowing and our intuition and the discernment between the anxious voice and that intuition. And then, so I'm curious, well, what happens when we try to layer on the curiosities that we might have? So I know you do a lot of human design. I'm a big fan of like the Myers-Briggs and like the 16
Mhm.
personalities. I
Yeah.
know people talk about disc or archetypes or enneagrams, or astrological, any of
Yeah.
those things. So I'm curious, like, how do we do a dance? And what's that experience for you where it's like, cool, I'm drawn to human design and it says all these things about me. And like, there's, at least I'll find that they'll say a lot of things about Scorpio. And I'm like, oh, that's definitely me. That's actually not me at all. Right.
Mhm.
So I'm curious for you, it's like, how do we create that relationship with ourselves, that place of inner knowing, and then add these layers of the things that we are curious about and not allow those things to call the shots
Yes.
on our knowing?
Yes. Ooh, I love these questions, Bailey. Okay, so this to me is all about trust, like
Mm,
self-trust. Like you trust that you know what's for you and what's not.
right.
So the first time I heard about human design was like 4-ish years ago, and it did not resonate at all. So I had a couple readings within a container I was in, and then I was like, cool. And I never picked that up again. And then 3 years later, I kept feeling deeply like, I think I'm supposed to get a human design read. Like I think this is for me right now. Like I don't know why. It seems kind of like dumb. I already had a reading. It didn't resonate. And it was like, just do the fuck. Like I just felt
Right.
like I am so curious about what is here for me. So I did the reading, and then for whatever reason, I was ready for that information then. And so it's trusting that like, right? Like, and if it doesn't
Right.
resonate,
Right.
fine. It doesn't mean anything. And if it does resonate, fine. It doesn't mean anything. Like, right. And if you change your mind, fine. Like you get to change all the time. And so I think that trust of, you can take what works for you and leave the rest is really the way. Cause I think we have this habit as humans with brains where we put ourselves in such these boxes. Like
Right. We want to
this is
categorize.
right. Like I am this kind of person. And this has been the most freeing, liberating process for me, particularly in the last year. That's why I literally just rebranded my podcast called It's All Me, because I felt like so constricted. Like, am I for this kind of woman, or am I for like the modern mainstream corporate woman, or am I for the witchy woman? Am I for the person who gets human design, and then I was like, this is bullshit. First of all, I've never met a woman who's just one thing. The end. I've never met a woman who stays exactly the same her whole life, and I am not. So
Right.
what if we just are like, it's all me? Like
Right.
sometimes I like to use goddess cards, and sometimes I like to go for a run and I feel inspired that way. And sometimes I pray, and sometimes I drink a bottle of wine and I dance on tables.
Yeah.
Like it all is me, and that's normal. And that's, like we can just trust that like we'll know what's for us, but we don't need to be limited by, well, I said I like Myers-Briggs, but I don't. So human design is like totally different, right? It's like, just have it all, put it all in a big fucking gumbo.
Right.
Stir it up, and that gets to be like, like that
Right.
gets to be your experience as a human. Like we don't need to label it and define it.
Right. Well, I do think I love the gumbo. I just love the gumbo because it's like it's this and it's this and it's this. And I think that it lends itself to the reminder that we are multidimensional beings. And that, I mean, we don't even need to go down the rabbit hole of like, and we don't have a 24-hour hormonal cycle and then we'll just be banging things out day after day, like dudes. Like that's just not going to happen. But it's like when I think that you're right, like when we honor all these different parts of ourselves, then we have an accurate picture of who we are, which then takes us down that beautiful winding road that seems oh so elusive of self-acceptance. Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is me and that's me. Like, I can dance on the table and I could be a boss ass bitch. Like, I could do both of these things. All of
And then
these
you could go
things.
be sober for a year, and then you could be a shaman, and then, right? Like, it's like,
Right.
what do you feel to do this month? Like, be it, do it, like, have that experience, and
Why do you
don't.
think that we try so hard to put ourselves in some boxes or some paint by number? Like, why do we try so hard to make it like two-dimensional when it's we're further from two-dimensional that we could be, that we could
Right.
possibly be? Why do we want to be so linear?
Well, I would have to credit the patriarchy on this one, right? Because
Shout out to them.
like, if you think about, I was just reading about this on like somebody's post who knows way more about it than me, but it is really fascinating to me um because when we came over to America, who was living here? Like, native people who lived in harmony with nature's cycles, who like took what they needed, who like had a
The first
totally
people,
different
sure.
relationship to their identity and purpose on this planet. And in came a bunch of white men and decided they were savages, and this is how you become prosperous. And it did build a great country in a lot of ways, but at the cost, at the cost of a lot of people and a lot of sacred practices and like sacred teachings about what it means to be a part of this planet. And I think we just cut off the life force, right? And so we were like, we don't need nature, we don't need spirituality, we don't need any of it. We're gonna like farm it out to factories and mass produce it and make millions of dollars, right? And so again, not making this bad or wrong, this is just part of our whatever. I have nothing against powerful white men, right? But it is really just, these are just facts. And so then we look at what happened to especially women and their roles in society, and as women, as beings that also bring life earthside. I mean, we literally used to sit around in caves and breastfeed and or like be in red tents and be together. And now we're in this assembly line of, here is the track and here's the key to success. And here's who you get to be if you want to be the 1% of white males that are successful, right? And so again, going back to entrepreneurship, why it's so amazing, I think, is because it's one of the few avenues that kind of forces you to take a look at this whole way of putting ourselves in boxes and cutting ourselves off from our soul and our humanity and just natural cycles, and be like, I actually don't need to, I'm not really part of the patriarchy in this way anymore, right? Like I get to choose now. I have more flexibility I'm having to look at. And so that's why I'm so grateful for my experience, because I would have just happily climbed the corporate ladder forever. If I had gotten a job like I had applied for, I would have happily just done that and like been who I thought I was supposed to be, because I genuinely thought it was my only road to success. I had no other examples.
That was the narrative.
Like there's no other examples in my life of anything different. Like none.
Right.
So yeah, you have to have like examples in your life of other things that are possible to see that you can be all of you.
Absolutely. Oh, so you're going to love this story. I just flew back to Jersey last weekend at a speaking gig, but I also went to go and see my aunt, who is actively dying. And and why I'm not weeping right now is because she is a person who taught me to live life on my own terms. She was a chiropractor with multiple practices. Everyone who met her loved her. And she really just embraced life fully. And she was one of my first demonstrations. She's 72. So it's like you had my dad who did start his business, and he's still doing that exact same business. Like the man, it's what, right now we're recording this and it is 1:30 in the afternoon. He is at lunch till 2:00. I could tell you where he is, what he's doing. Like he's like
What he's eating.
Yeah. Yeah, he's at Panera. I know this. He gets soup and half a sandwich. This is like, yes, that's what Bill's doing. And then my mom, who worked in the school system and did the 35 years gold watch, and retire, the whole thing. But then I had this aunt who was just like a light in the world. And I think she got married 3 different times. She would travel here, there, everywhere. She was so positive, and just like everybody was doing it this way, she did it her own way. Everyone was having kids. She didn't have kids. And at that time, those years of growing up as a kid and seeing, well, Aunt Mar is very different. Like, what here doesn't belong? Oh, it's Aunt Mar.
I feel everywhere I go.
But
One
yeah,
of these things is not like the other.
right. That's how it goes. But it was just like, and that's why even right now she's in her final days, but she's choosing her death just like she wants. She's like, I want to be in my house. I want to be with my cats. Leave me alone. And everyone's and it takes a village and everyone's surrounding. But the point that we're making here is, when you have that unique opportunity, whether it was a teacher along the way, somebody's big sister, a coach that you had, just someone who's doing it a little bit different than everything else, and we say, oh, that's an option too. Sweet. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to be like what I see on TV, or the dysfunction that I see in my family of origin, or, like having absolutely no models. But instead, when we have that unique opportunity to just see it a little bit differently.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Make it safe for your conscious brain too. Because It's like, if it's not safe, if it doesn't exist, like, I'm not going to do it. Just not gonna do it.
Well, and then like even weaving it into the earlier line of questioning about kids, like I think it's really important for my daughter Phoebe. Like I'm, headed to run a retreat in Greece, and I've run retreats around the world. And people are like, "Oh, are you bringing Phoebe?" I'm like, "No, I'm not, because I'm working. If I was a neurosurgeon, would anybody ask me if I was bringing her in the OR? Like, no, I would not be. But I will take her to Greece at some point in time. But the demonstration here is like, I want Phoebe to grow up seeing me travel, so that when she's a mom, that's normalized for her. And I had the pleasure of growing up and seeing my parents were traveling, and they would go to different places. So it's normal to me that I would do that. So when we're more ourselves, we give everyone around us, whether we think they're watching or not, we give them a permission slip to be themselves as well. Well, it's not our responsibility. It is kind of the bonus, a little side bonus.
I mean, you do it because it feels really good to be yourself. It feels really good to take the trip you desire to take, period. Right. But then it's like, oh, only good things happen when you face the fear of like, do I get to do this? So I totally agree. Right. It's so awesome. Ugh.
Which all comes back to getting into a relationship with yourself.
Yeah. Got to do it. You get to do it. I mean, it's a good time knowing yourself. I mean,
it's who you're stuck with. You're with us.
You spend so much time working on so many other relationships. I feel it's interesting. I've been reflecting the last couple months on some of my friendships, and I feel more distant from some of like my best friends than I ever have in my life. And I will go into a fear story about it for like 5 seconds and be like, is this okay? Or like, and then I'm like, no, I am like deeper in relationship with myself than I've ever been in my life. And some of these friendships, like when I was younger, that was my identity, was this person. Right. And so recalibrating that can sometimes feel really, really strange and scary. And like, am I doing this wrong? But it is true. It's the only person that you're with forever. And working on yourself, like healing old wounds, healing ancestral patterns, all of that stuff is the only thing that ensures you won't pass them down to your kids. So it's kind of like,
go.
Might as well just like dive into this whole.
So 2 for 1. 2 for
Right.
1. Well,
Really?
2 for 1 for me, 3 for 1 for you.
So many. How many? Yeah. So many.
But that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. It is. It's that relationship that we have with ourselves. And to your point, at the very start of our episode today, no one teaches you how to do that. And especially if we don't see it demonstrated, then we don't know it's an option or it's accessible. And when we do have those unique opportunities to either get a glimpse or to do it now, like I think it's a privilege to be able to do this work now. And people, and you and I have talked in the last episode, so we'll put that in the notes for anybody who hasn't listened to the last episode with G. But even like going to therapy or having a coach, I never ever thought, even as a teenager, that going to therapy was because you were fucked up. It's like, no, it's because I want to be the best version of me that I can be. So yeah, I'm gonna get a coach, a shaman, a therapist, like bring it on.
That's awesome. I was like, I am fucked up and I want to be the best version of me that I can be. So it was very confusing for me unraveling that, but that's awesome, and I think you're right. And I think also, like we're talking about, nobody teaches that, but again, such a privilege to be a woman now, because hello, we teach it, right? So it's like, now people teach it. Now it's not so crazy. If you go on the online space, like, I mean, I guess it depends what your circle is like, but like, it's not hard to find women who are really leading themselves in this way and leading other women. So we're so much more fortunate than our parents were in that way. Like, we know so much more. We have so much more access. We have access to teachers, examples, role models. Yes. So it's already not the same.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and before we hop off, that reminds me, I was watching 60 Minutes because I'm 700 years old. But they did a piece on Sue Bird, the professional basketball player. I don't know if you know her. Right. So, well, first of all, she's been in the WNBA for 19 years because the WNBA will be 25 years old. I was like, I feel like they just started that, right? I'm like, where have I been?
You're 700 years old. So
I'm 700 years old. 25 years is just yesterday. But so they were calling her, so interesting. My head almost exploded. They were calling her a generational athlete. She's 41 and still playing professional basketball. Right. So they called her a generational athlete. I was like, but the interesting part here is we've always had a narrative of, oh yeah, well, they're in their 30s now, or oh yeah, they're probably going to be wrapping up their career. And, people are pushing for her to be in the Olympics again for Paris 2024. And she's like, I haven't ruled it out. And as long as I, especially as an athlete, keep taking care of my body. But again, there's a model right there of like, well, you know what? Why the hell not?
Yeah, 40 was so young. Like, that's great. Can you imagine though, like being in the athletic world, like they need the mindset more than anyone, right? Because that would be so limiting for your potential for success in your career if that is the narrative specifically there.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you on.
Gosh,
it's always so fun. I know. We have a good time. We never know what we're going to talk about, but we figure it out.
I think you're so good at asking questions. I'm like, this is like a great coffee date. So thanks for having me.
I love it. We'll have to actually have coffee next time.
Yes, next time we're in Jersey, we need to line it up.
I know. Or the next time in South Carolina. I was just there. I know. I was on a retreat though. So sorry. Next time. Okay. All right. Well, everyone, again, thank you so much for joining us, tuning in and listening. And I hope that this opens your mind on how you can get into better relationship with yourself. So definitely check us out on Spotify, Apple. We're on YouTube. You could see what I look like today. And it's a hot yoga mess. And then we're also on Google Play. So all the good things. And we'll make sure that we put the previous episode with G on, and also where you can find her, because I know she's hanging out on Instagram. Can you tell us your Instagram handle for everybody who's like driving and not writing things down?
Sure. It's Gervase Kolmos. So it's GervaseKolmos.
And we'll put the link in the podcast notes. So thank you guys so much. Bye.